For the first time in more than 2 years, I recently started buying more shares of a particular high-yield dividend stock currently in my portfolio. With the exception of reinvesting all of my dividends, I had gone almost 27 months without buying any additional shares of this position. So unless you've been watching my channel for a long time, or you're a member of the Patreon, you might not even be aware that I still own this company because I rarely talk about them. But as I'll discuss in this video, I recently started adding a small amount to it now that the environment they operate in has improved. The company I'm referring to is Omega Healthcare REIT, ticker OHI. Omega is a real estate investment trust that provides financing and capital to the long-term healthcare industry, specifically skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facility operators across the US and the UK. They're a triple net lease REIT and they have roughly 1,000 properties in their portfolio, representing 92,284 beds. Despite this healthcare REIT owning brain trauma centers, independent living facilities, and behavioral health centers, Omega owns a large number of skilled nursing facilities. These are the most common types of facilities that patients are discharged to after suffering a serious injury. And the reason it's so attractive is because it's the cheapest option available. They provide 24-hour medical care at a significantly cheaper price when compared to hospitals and inpatient rehabilitation facilities. The average stay in an S&F is 28 days, although it can be extended depending on the severity of the injury. Some common reasons for being sent to an S&F include recovering from major surgeries, like joint replacements and spinal cord surgeries. Patients can also be discharged to them for mild to severe brain trauma, strokes, heart failure, and COPD among many other conditions. So why did I start buying Omega again after more than 2 years? The main reason was because I took a major risk when I first bought OHI, which was during the pandemic. I bought in pretty massively when the stock was at a tremendous discount because of all the issues these facilities were facing at the time. As I'm sure most of us still remember, these nursing homes and these skilled facilities were devastated during the pandemic. Many of them had infection rates of over 75% and casualties were tragically very high for residents in these facilities. This led to low occupancy ratings and people felt safer caring for their loved ones at home as opposed to an S&F and other senior living facilities. Several of Omega's operators filed for bankruptcy because they were unable to pay rent on their properties. There was a length of time in 2023 where OHI's dividend payout exceeded 100%, meaning they weren't earning enough to cover their regular dividend. But despite the challenges, Omega never had to cut their dividend. With only one exception, every other senior living facility REIT had to cut their dividend because of the pandemic. That included Ventas Incorporated, VTR, and Welltower Incorporated, ticker WELL. The only other one that did survive without a cut was LTC Properties. It is rare for me to make a bet on a company that's facing a situation like this. When I bought a lot of my shares in June of 2022, it was offering a dividend yield exceeding 10%, more than double compared to what's typical for an equity REIT. So as I'll get into, Omega has been posting better financial results, and today they're in a much better position. But it's still a riskier investment compared to the larger, more diversified REITs like Agree Realty and Triple N REIT. But again, on the other hand, it's still offering a much higher than average yield. So let's start with the positives. This company holds properties in an industry that I believe is very ideal for investing. Due to the aging US population, there's a 44% projected increase in adults 65 and over in the next 20 years. Currently making up around 17% of the US population, by 2040, the percentage of Americans aged 65 and plus is expected to increase to 22%. The older a person gets, the more likely they are to need a skilled nursing facility at some point. And another important fact is that skilled nursing facilities are not being built to keep up with demand. New construction on these types of properties has slowed down over the past decade, and Omega projects that demand will eventually outpace supply in just 5 years. If that does happen, this should lead to much higher occupancy ratings in these S&Fs. And it's just a fact that these kinds of businesses will always be needed to a certain degree. People at certain times will need around-the-clock healthcare at prices cheaper than staying at a hospital. Accidents happen and people get older, there's no way around that. Skilled nursing facilities provide an essential service that many of us will likely need at some point in our lives. Now eventually, the US aging population will level off at some point where we stop seeing growth in the elderly population, but this is a conversation that's still decades away. Aside from the industry itself, there's a few things about Omega specifically I like when compared to all other REITs, regardless of the industry they're in. First, this company is a triple net lease REIT. Triple net lease means the property tenants and not Omega themselves are responsible for paying for maintenance, taxes, and insurance, among a couple of other things. Not all REITs are triple N REITs, and you can probably guess that this is a pretty good deal for the company and thus investors. It saves the company a good amount of money that they can use to acquire more properties or potentially grow their dividend even faster. Their weighted average lease term is 9.4 years, which is really good. You always want to lock in tenants for as long as possible because it provides better predictability in rent payments. Over half of their lease agreements with their operators expire after 2033, which is better than many other REITs that I've come across. Plus, they also have a really great opportunity to invest in other SNFs. Despite being the largest owner of these properties in the US, they still only own 5% of the market. They claim they're aiming to double in size in the next decade, which is pretty aggressive, so we'll have to wait and see if they'll be able to achieve that. They have been aggressive in expanding outside the US, with many of their newest acquisitions being outside of North America. So although we've looked at all of the attractive features, let's now look at a couple of negative aspects that people should take note of. First is their high payout ratio. Even before the pandemic, Omega is a company that has had a higher payout ratio compared to most conservative REITs that exist. A typical payout ratio for this company is usually in the 90s in terms of percentage. The high dividend yield it's currently offering now is a good indicator that the stock naturally comes with more risk than a company like Realty Income. Second, Omega hasn't resumed their dividend growth yet. They last increased their dividend in late 2019, right before everything went haywire. For 16 years, this REIT had incredible dividend growth, which understandably they had to put on hold in order to become more stabilized. They haven't announced anything yet in terms of when they plan to go back to growing their dividend, but now at least they're making good progress on their financials. I'm hoping we'll see some kind of dividend increase in the next year or so. Because remember, this company claims they're aiming to double in size in the next 10 years. That should lead to some decent growth in their distributions. And then finally, Omega's still dealing with a couple of issues with two of their operators. La Vie Care Centers announced that they had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in June of last year, and another company named Maplewood has also been struggling. In both cases, Omega has been working out deals with both operators, with some of their properties being sold to new tenants. What they're facing now, though, isn't anywhere as bad as it was 2 years ago. So with all these things in mind, I've been buying more shares of OHI. Not a significant amount, I want to make that clear, because even though they survived COVID, it's still a riskier REIT than the average company in this sector. But I am definitely encouraged by all this progress Omega's been making last year. Their funds available for distribution grew by 5.7% last year, with the majority of that being in the latter half of the year. So with that being said, I'm betting that Omega's recovery will continue, and since it's drawn back in share price in the past couple months, I felt now was a good time to add a few more shares. Let me know your thoughts of OHI and if you think it's worth holding or not. But with that being said, that's going to wrap up today's video. If you'd like to connect and also see what's inside my own personal dividend portfolio, then feel free to check me out over on our Patreon, where you'll receive updates and be able to talk to me and other higher yielding dividend and income investors. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and until next time, take care.